All right, I'm back, everybody. So this is the document that you are going to fill out when you're doing your planning for your short story. It's a Google form, and I think it's pretty straightforward. The first thing that you're going to do is think about the setting of your story, which would be part of the exposition, right? You are thinking about the place where your story is going to be set and this time that your story is going to be set. So when and where, right? I'd also like you to think about the mood of the story and what that dominant mood of the story is going to be. This is something that you will set up, maybe even by accident, in the beginning of your story, but hopefully purposely in the beginning of your story, by where you're setting the story and by when you're setting the story. For instance, if the story is going to be late in the evening during a rainstorm, it should make sense that the rest of your story has a pretty dark, pretty frightening, depressing, sad mood to it. Because typically, darkness, typically poor weather, is going to demonstrate to the reader that the mood of the story is going to be negative, right? If your story's in a beautiful field of wildflowers and bright sunshine, well, that might tip off the reader to a more upbeat, more positive mood. So think about what that mood of the story is going to be for you and use the place, use the time to help you create that mood. The next thing you're going to do is work with character development. I ask you to think about 2 characters here. You certainly can have more characters in your story. But just to get started, I want you to think about 2 characters and 4 traits of those 2 characters. 2 personality traits and 2 physical traits. Right? So you'd have character 1, their name, followed by 2 personality traits and 2 physical traits, and then do the same thing for character 2. Again, you're welcome to have 3, 4, 5 characters. It's a short story, so it's going to be a limited number of characters. You may only have 1 depending on your story. So if that's the case, just put a character of any sort into the other characters field on the Google form, so you know, because the questions are required and then they won't let you submit it. But if you're going to have a story where there's just 1 character, again, that would be great. Make sure you at least enter a period or just your name wherever into the rest of the fields for character 2 so you can bother to submit the form. After you move on from the characters, you're going to identify for me the conflict of the story, and that's going to be from the inciting incident up around the climax and back down to the resolution. So what's the inciting incident? What is the event that's going to happen that's going to start the characters into a conflict, the protagonist having to deal with something, right, your main character? And then I've identified for you places for 3 events in your rising action. I'm looking for you to give me at least 2, right? Depending on how you describe them or how they develop, maybe there's only a couple, but I've given you an expectation of at least 2 events in your rising action, but place for 3. You'll notice that the 3rd rising action event is not a required answer. Okay. After you've gone over those ideas, those rising action ideas, the events that are going to make the story get more and more intense, and go up the arc is what is the climax of the story. That's a singular event that identifies for the reader the most intense part of your story, the most intense part of your conflict. Right? After you've reached that point, of course, remember you have the falling action. The conflict is still going, you haven't resolved the story completely. There are still some tense moments, but those tense moments, as you go down, get less and less tense. I've asked you to consider 2, but you'll notice again that the second event in the falling action is not a required answer. Maybe the way your story is set up doesn't allow for much falling action because the story's ending so quickly, and that's totally acceptable. The last thing I've asked you to do is the resolution. Think about making the story return to normal as quickly as to return to as close to normal from before the inciting incident as possible. So let me repeat that. The resolution is about bringing the story back to as close to normal as it appeared before the inciting incident. Right? Obviously, when there's conflict, nothing goes back to it as exactly how it was, but in a resolution, things get back to normal for the character. What does that new normal look like in your story? When you're done, you're going to hit submit. I've tried to set this form up so that you will receive a receipt of the form with your answers. This becomes your outline. Right? And then you can use this as you start to write this story. If you have any questions, please email me and we'll see what we can do to get you cleared away. Thanks.